The Republic of Korea and Mexico, which established their diplomatic relations 54 years ago, formed the Strategic Alliance for Mutual Prosperity in 2006. The two countries have an important trade relationship, and the recent summit talks are expected to further reinforce bilateral cooperation, especially in the economic sector. On this edition of the Innerview, we'll get to meet José Luis Bernal Rodriguez, the Ambassador of Mexico to the Republic of Korea. Ambassador Bernal has been a member of Mexico's Foreign Service for 35 years, representing his country around the world, including the United States of America and Europe. Since 2013, he has been acting as a bridge between Korea and Mexico as a veteran diplomat.
Today on the Innerview, we are joined by Mr. José Luis Bernal, the Ambassador of Mexico to the Republic of Korea. We'll be discussing the significance of the Republic of Korea-Mexico summit held on the 4th of April and the bilateral economic and social cooperation measures to be implemented. Mr. Bernal, welcome to the Innerview. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me here, and very pleased to have this opportunity.
It's great to have you. I understand there was a volcano eruption very recently in Mexico City that affected the city.
Well, actually, the volcano, the Popocatépetl, has been very active for the last many years.
Okay.
There is almost a daily explosion. The last few days, there were big explosions of ashes that affected for a little time activities, mostly in the surrounding cities, Puebla, Mexico City, with a short interruption of activities in the airport, but hopefully nothing of big consequences.
All right. It's a relief to hear that there were no serious casualties.
No casualties at all, and only the emergency. It's mostly an environmental emergency.
Right.
And authorities are taking care of that because this is almost normal for Mexico City.
Is that so? Yeah. Okay, well, hopefully things will get back more to normal in the very near future. You were appointed as the Ambassador of Mexico to the Republic of Korea in 2013. How has life in Korea been treating you?
Well, it has been a very nice experience indeed. When we speak about professional activities, personal life, I think it's important to distinguish what we are doing.
Yeah.
Professionally, we have, I say, we're in the right time at the right place.
Right.
Because I play a role of a communicator, of course, as a diplomat, but I like to pay special interest to economic diplomacy and social development. We have been able to witness firsthand the big progress of Korea as a society, as a country, as an economic power. And also, we are increasing the cooperation links between Korea and Mexico, which is very important in terms of economic diplomacy. If we speak of a more personal note, I can tell you my wife and I have enjoyed visiting different places in Korea.
Okay, have you had time to?
Oh, yeah, we have taken time to do that.
Right.
Also as part of our diplomatic activities, but also on a personal note. And we have enjoyed visiting nice places, meeting very nice people, and of course, learning about Korea's history, about social progress in this country, and of course, about the way we can enjoy life and share common values.
That sounds great. So let's talk about the relationship between Mexico and South Korea then. The diplomatic relations were formally established in 1962, and over the past 10 years, we've seen increased bilateral cooperation under the Strategic Alliance for Mutual Prosperity. And of course, earlier this month, Mexico welcomed South Korea's President Park Geun-hye to Mexico City for the summit held there. What was the significance of that summit?
I would say three different ideas about the significance of the summit. One is that we were able, under the leadership of our two presidents, to take stock of the very good progress the bilateral relationship has registered in the last few years.
Okay.
Yes, there are big progress in every aspect of it. Secondly, the presidents reiterated the commitment of the two countries to the strategic partnership that we initiated back in 2005, 2006. So we have completed 10 years of this alliance, and we are now ready to engage in a sort of a new chapter of this relationship.
Right.
And third, in order to give substance to this declaration, 22 different agreements were announced, official agreements, plus a good number of agreements between private entities so that we can continue expanding cooperation, relations, economic, social, cultural relations in every aspect of our friendship, our cooperation, and we're ready to follow up on that.
Okay, so as you said, the summit saw the discussion of various measures to improve the bilateral economic and social cooperation between the two countries.
Many windows were open, I say, in this visit in order for Korea and Mexico to continue working together on science, technology, industry, culture, education, ICT, telecommunications, health. We were witnessing new agreements on the participation of Korean firms in different projects of infrastructure in Mexico. We are opening new avenues for cooperation on the exchange of lessons of development.
Yeah.
We are sharing this knowledge both in terms of development, public policy, and how the future looks like. We also are increasing joint actions in international organizations.
Right.
Because we are two like-minded countries, I mean, two emerging powers that are trying to behave as responsible actors in international affairs.
Indeed.
So it's not only the bilateral relation, it's not only economic, I think it's a wide range of activities in which our two peoples are getting to know each other better. And for this expansion, the two governments are ready to continue expanding the legal framework so that we can facilitate more business, more tourism, more culture, more educational exchanges, and continue working on international affairs.
Well, we'll be talking about some of the economic and social and other measures that were discussed in the summit later on in the show. But for now, let's take a look at this video clip before we continue with our talk.
At the summit meeting earlier this month, President Park Geun-hye and Enrique Pena Nieto, the President of Mexico, agreed to resume the free trade agreement negotiations, which had been suspended in 2008, and to reinforce cooperation in healthcare, automotive, and other promising industries. In addition to affirming Mexico's commitment to support Korea in joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a working-level meeting was scheduled for the fourth quarter of 2016 to seek diverse measures for economic cooperation. The summit talks resulted in the conclusion of 34 memoranda of understanding, of which 29 pertain to the economic sector. This has also opened up to opportunities for Korean enterprise to take part in the bidding for the near $600 billion development project on energy and transportation in Mexico. The summit meeting was followed by the Korea-Mexico Business Forum, held in the presence of 400 people from the economic and business sectors. President Park noticed that Korea and Mexico will collaborate closely in a wide range of areas, including trade, investment, infrastructure, technology, and industry. The summit meeting not only reaffirmed the important trade relations between Korea and Mexico, but also reinforced the bilateral cooperation for mutual growth and advancement.
I think the talks of increasing trade investment were particularly noteworthy, especially as Korea is the third largest investor in Mexico out of the Asian countries. And I believe a memorandum of understanding was signed on the promotion of trade investment and cooperation. So what kind of effects do you see on trade volumes and investment amount for both countries?
I think that it's important, first of all, to mention the volumes of trade that we are already exchanging between our two countries. In the last few years, we have seen that every year, Korea and Mexico have been exchanging more than $15 billion of trade, every year. Last year, bilateral trade sort of made the jump of more than 20% to the level of $17 billion, which places Korea as the sixth most important trading partner for Mexico in the world.
Right.
It's very important. For Korea, Mexico has become the 10th most important destination of exports. It's a number one partner in Latin America. And very important in this economic relationship is the volume of investment of Korean companies in Mexico. We're speaking of more than 1,700 or 1,700 companies who have established their operations in Mexico. And by this, we're talking about not only increasing trade, but we're talking about creating value chains which are working both for the benefit of our two domestic markets, and increasingly they are taking part in the global markets, particularly in those most dynamic markets in North America, of course, the United States and Canada, Mexico itself, but from Mexico, there are many operations going on to the rest of Latin America. Mexico has become also like a hub for foreign investment, and is working very wide in terms of trade through a network of trade agreements with more than 45 countries. So for Mexico, production is working in reaching out to European markets, to other Asian markets. And we're very happy to see that this increasing relationship, trade and investment, is reflecting in other sectors of bilateral cooperation, but also in an increased presence of the two countries together in international markets.
Okay, so, and we can expect to see further increases.
We are working on that, and there were 3 different measures that were adopted during the presidential visit. One was the creation of this joint committee for the examination of possibilities in terms of trade, investment, for industry and energy. I mean, this is starting to work already. Second, President Peña Nieto of Mexico conferred Mexico's support to Korea in case Korea decides to join the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Mexico is one of the founding members of the TPP. We are committed to that, and we are just in the process of ratification of the agreement so that this becomes the new rule of international trade, at least for the 12 nations making part of this agreement. And third, there were a series of agreements that were signed between different agencies. COTRA, for example, on the Korean side, COIMA, the Importers Association. In the side of Mexico was Pro-Mexico, the promotional agency for trade and investment, the International Business Council of Mexico for trade, investment, and technology also signed an agreement with Korean entities so that we have a new framework to develop additional activities in the months to come. Most important, I think, for the sake of for the future of our bilateral relations is that the two presidents agreed that high-level talks will be held at the end of the year, so that at the ministerial level, the ministers will agree on the possibilities to launch eventual negotiations for a free trade agreement, a bilateral one.
Right.
So we're working on every aspect, multilateral aspect, bilateral, technical matters, exchange of policies, and preparing for the terrain so as to have the proper consensus in order to launch negotiations for an FTA.
Okay, so lots of things in the pipeline. You mentioned COTRA. Now, Mexico is very competitive in the IT market under the government's national digital strategy, and I believe it's ranked 3rd in the world for IT outsourcing as well. And COTRA signed an MOU with Mexico's largest online distribution company in the hopes of increasing e-commerce. What kind of effects do you expect to see there?
We see a big potential of development in this area because in Mexico we are still in the initial stages of developing the e-commerce sector.
Okay.
Retail markets in Mexico, I mean, considering a GDP of $1.3 trillion per year, I mean, retail market is around $250 billion per year.
Okay.
E-commerce plays a very small role so far in the Mexican market. But we are seeing that increasingly Mexican consumers are having access to both internet, smartphones. This is connected to the increased capacity of purchasing power among the Mexican population. And in the future, we will continue to expand opportunities for e-commerce. So the fact that Korean companies are working together with Mexican firms in developing this sector opens a wide range of possibilities for the future.
Indeed. And we also talked about Korean firms investing in Mexico or expanding into Mexico. And I hear it's become much simpler and easier for them to obtain the necessary certification under the Normas Oficiales Mexicanas, or the official Mexican standards, because of this establishment of a certification and technical innovation center for small and medium-sized enterprises. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, of course. So we are working together on 2 areas. One is to establish these centers of certification by Mexican official agencies or by private Korean entities or international entities certified in the United States and in the rest of the Americas. And we are together, Mexico and Korea, creating a new center for allowing the certification of new products into the Mexican market. A very important segment that was agreed during the visit was the certification, for example, of medical devices.
Okay.
Mexico has become one of the most important exporters of Mexican devices in the world. It's the first supplier of the United States in this sector. And now Korean firms producing these products in Mexico will be able to receive the certification to reach other markets, particularly those in the United States. We are also working together with Korea so as to make progress in the certification of agricultural products coming from Mexico into the Korean market.
Right.
And we are also expecting to achieve better results on that area so that the phytosanitary requirements and other certifications that are needed to come into this market are also increased in the near future. So we're trying to facilitate the opportunities for the business sector so that we can continue expanding the volumes of trade, which are high, but can be even higher in the future.
And it's at all levels of business, from small
at different
to
levels,
multinational
small,
corporations.
medium-sized companies,
Yeah.
International, multinational companies, and of course, we are giving special attention to these joint ventures being established in Mexico so that they produce in Mexico, they sell in Mexico, and they are able to come out to the international markets with no problems of certification.
Okay. There's also talks of bilateral cooperation in terms of infrastructure, and I understand a number of Korean firms are involved in this $600 billion project run by the Mexican government. Can you give us more details about that project?
Yeah, the program is a big program of infrastructure that covers a 5-year span. This was started back in 2013, will cover until 2018, and Mexico is engaged in a big process of modernization of infrastructure and developing new areas. I can mention, for example, the construction of the new airport in Mexico City, a big project.
Right.
Where we're working on the modernization of highways and middle roads. There is a special program for the modernization of ports and maritime facilities, including the retaking of some new shipbuilding facilities in Mexico. We're working also in the modernization of the electric generation sector.
Yeah.
It's important to mention that Mexico, because of the rate of growth of the industry in the urban areas, we need to double the capacity of energy production in the next 10 years.
Right.
So there will be a lot of investment in these sectors. And we are engaging in new projects in order to modernize railroads and to build new ones. Public transportation is a priority in Mexico. Energy, we're working, apart from the electricity, we're working on the modernization of the oil sector, refineries, and also we are looking at the new technologies for green growth, which is important that we incorporate new technologies, and all these projects make this big program for infrastructure that is amounting at this point at least to $600 billion in a 6-year period.
So there's a huge scope, but it's a very long-term project.
And important to mention that most of these projects are being performed under the public-private partnership model.
Okay.
So many private companies will be able to take part in these projects.
All right. And you mentioned energy, and I know that a Korean company is also involved in a project run by the Mexican state-led Federal Electricity Commission. Could you give us more details on that?
Yeah, we have seen the participation of Korean companies through the consortium of KEPCO in the last few years in Mexico. There is already one plant operating completely, 100% by the Korean company in association with the Mexican National Electricity Company, CFE. In the last 2 years, Korean companies have been also bidding in these open processes of bid processes that are being called by the Mexican government, because these are agencies which are under the aegis of the Mexican government. This year we have at least 2 projects or 3 who will be announced very, very soon. And we are also including the participation of Korean companies in other projects that have to do not only with the electricity, but also with the modernization of the oil sector.
Right.
And refineries in Mexico.
All right. I understand that there's a water shortage problem in Mexico right now, and that there are plans to set up consortiums to establish smart water management systems and an integrated gasification combined cycle power plant in Monterrey. What kind of economic impacts do you see for those projects? And will there be some in Korea
there are both
as well?
economic and social impacts that we are trying to pursue with these projects. Monterrey is one. I mean, this combined cycle plant has to do with the production of electricity.
Yeah.
With the introduction also of the use of more natural gas in industrial activities. And the final result will be the production of clean water. But we're also working together with other Korean companies in the establishment of new, for example, desalinization plants along the Pacific area in Mexico. We're working, the latest agreements are aimed at introducing technologies in Mexico from Korea that will possibilitate the cleaning of water and the sanitization of resources in different parts of the Mexican territory.
Right.
It's not only related to one region. And what is important is that we're introducing what are called the intelligent systems of administration of water, which have been already adopted in Korea, and Mexico is very keen to incorporate these new technologies, including the administration systems. It's not only the technique, but also the system of administration.
How it's run as well.
Yeah.
And I hear Mexico is also planning to, or hoping to, provide better access to healthcare using information technology. How is that going to work?
This is working already in two areas. One is the exchange of knowledge about public policies on how to deal with the social security, the medical services sector. We are engaged in that reform as well in Mexico. It's a big sector in Mexico. And the latest agreement with Korea is intended to introduce the telemedicine techniques.
Okay.
This has to do with how do we reach out to isolated communities. In Korea, there is a good experience in dealing with the small islands and with small communities in the territory. In Mexico, we have many small communities that do not have access to medical services. And through these technologies, we're trying to bring these medicines through internet, through telecommunications, to the most isolated regions. It will also help in the provision of services in big cities like Mexico City, when we need to have more rapid access of health services for many people, particularly disabled people.
Okay, so we've talked about a number of different cooperation measures. I think you mentioned 29 MOUs were signed? 22, excuse me. And it covers a multitude of areas: infrastructure, energy, water, some of which we've covered. In which area do you think we'll see the most effective cooperation and the most tangible results?
I think most tangible results we will see in the increase of trade initially.
Okay.
We are expecting to see more Korean companies to come and work on the technological side of development in Mexico. And more we see this commitment of international companies, not only Korean, to work together with the Mexican people in the establishment of research and development centers, and with the introduction of innovative technologies. Now, in my personal view, one of the most promising programs in cooperation has to do with the exchange of good practices,
right,
and the exchange of lessons on development.
Okay.
I mean, how we, both Mexico and Korea, have been able to overcome poverty, how we are trying to include more people in economic and social development, and we have to learn from each other in these historic lessons of development. We have already established a program for the exchange of knowledge, and this was renovated, expanded during the presidential visit, and we're looking forward to have much better results of this very, very important program.
Okay, so it's interesting that Mexico and Korea have these similarities in terms of rapid development, but we also have a lot to learn from each other.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And one of the big expectations from the summit talks was that the negotiations for the free trade agreement between South Korea and Mexico would resume. They halted in 2008. Do you see those talks resuming anytime soon?
I hope so. I personally hope so. And I think that the near future looks very promising in that direction. I always say that even if we do not have an FTA, trade is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to have additional agreements when something is not happening. I mean, trade is happening. I mentioned the figures already.
Yeah.
We'll continue to expand, and we would like to have more trade with Korea. Now, the fact that Mexico and Korea are very open countries to trade is demonstrated by the fact that Korea has free trade agreements with more than 50 countries.
Yeah.
Mexico with more than 40 countries. And more and more we are negotiating additional agreements. Now, what is missing in this big link, this big chain of agreements, is the bilateral one. So eventually we will have to come to an accord in terms of how we do link the two economies through new agreements. And the promise that the two presidents made and the instruction they gave to the ministers of trade is that we will continue working together so as to identify the best ways to continue increasing trade, either through an FTA or through other agreements, or eventually through the TPP or through the WTO. I mean, there are many possibilities, and we are exploring all of them at the same time.
Okay. At the time, in 2008, there was a lot of opposition to the free trade agreement from especially the steel and the petrochemical and the automotive industries. How do you plan to resolve those opposing views?
There have been many changes since 2008.
Okay.
I mean,
it has been a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, first of all, there was a big economic crisis, financial
Right.
crisis. And there was a structural change in both the Mexican and the Korean economy. Sectors that were against an FTA at that time, probably they don't exist anymore, or they are not the same as they were at the time.
Right.
So we cannot identify at this point specific sectors who are against. What we're doing is trying to identify all the sectors, industries, associations who are in favor.
Right.
So that we can get the political consensus in order to facilitate the negotiation on the one hand and the political approval on the other hand. I think it's important that we work internally, the two countries, so as to make sure that we have all the support for an eventual FTA negotiation. In Mexico, I can tell you we are doing that and very, very decidedly, because we have the interest the interest to make sure that we have all the political support for this.
Okay. You mentioned the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, as well. Mexico is a member and it's in its ratification stages now, you said. How is that going to affect the free trade agreement? Or will it at all?
It will facilitate it.
Okay.
In my view, and this is the view that we are sharing with the Korean government, in the TPP, Mexico is a founding member, together with the 12 nations which comprise this new agreement. We were developing new disciplines for international trade. Remember that in 1994, Mexico was one of the founding members of NAFTA, and NAFTA remodeled the rules for international trade in general a few years after it became into implementation. Now, TPP is looking for the new sectors, for the new disciplines in order to change the rules of international trade.
Right.
Once it is ratified, Mexico will be obligated by those rules, same the other 12 members or the other 11 members. And because of that, we believe that under the new disciplines, we will be able to have a better negotiation with any other country with which we engage on a bilateral FTA. So this will be the new rules. Korea has very good experience in terms of FTAs with the countries in Asia, in other regions. So the fact that we have very good experience, the two, will facilitate the adding up of disciplines. Any eventual new FTA between our two countries will not be a traditional one.
Right.
Will be a new one, innovative, introducing the disciplines to which the both of us are obligated to.
Okay, so it seems promising for
very much,
a free
very
trade
much
agreement,
indeed,
perhaps in the next few years. You mentioned Korean companies that have expanded into Mexico being at about 1,700?
1,700, yeah,
Right.
at least, yeah.
What is that in dollar terms, do you know?
In dollar terms, we estimate that it's above, we can say it's close to $10 billion in the last few years. In the last few years.
And how are Korean products and enterprises viewed by the Mexican public?
There is a very good image. I mean, I can tell you about the electrodomestic appliances production, about the smartphones, of course, electronics in general, but also we see more and more the presence of Korean companies in the steel sector, in auto parts. Now we are about to see the initial production of automobiles in Mexico. So in every sector, Korean companies are increasing their presence in Mexico. There is also, this is accompanied by cultural aspects.
Indeed.
By food. Korean cuisine is also becoming more popular in Mexico. So it's not only trade, it's not only investment, it's a big social interaction that is being developed, and more the Mexican public becomes used to Korean brands, which is important.
So in terms of cultural activities then, I hear that Korean cultural content is very popular over in Mexico, including the food that you mentioned and K-pop. So a little birdie told me that you enjoy very much some of the Korean idol group music.
Of course.
How long have you been interested in K-pop?
Well, mainly since I came here. It's only for the last 3 years. But I can tell you that Hallyu is taking a big impact in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's not only K-pop, it's also the traditional costumes of Korea, Korean food, music of every different nature from Korea. And I wanted to mention that during her visit, President Park Geun-hye was greeted enthusiastically by a big group of fans of K-pop. She was very happy. We were very enthusiastically attending this festival of Korean culture, including K-pop, including traditional performances, and also including joint numbers, musical numbers, combining Mexican traditions, Korean traditions, sports, which are also very important. I mean, the best taekwondians are in Mexico, not only in Korea.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Oh,
we have very good. We have the world champion of taekwondo, and it's a Mexican lady.
Amazing.
And more and more, we are sort of discovering the cultural affinities between our two countries.
Yeah.
So K-pop is a very important part of that process. I like a lot the music, but I also like the traditional music in Korea as well.
Okay, so Mexico is very used to being exposed to Korean culture, traditional and modern. What about the other way around? I mean, I think Koreans are familiar with, Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, famous Mexican painters, but we're not so familiar with other aspects of Mexican culture. Is there any aspects that you would like to introduce to Koreans especially?
There are many aspects that we are trying to introduce, not only through this program, but also it's a permanent program of the Embassy of Mexico here in Seoul. In the embassy, we carry out a program of at least 36 activities per year, including presentations of art, Mexican art, music, literature, films, and more Mexican food, gastronomy. We are also in a permanent campaign to promote tourism, more tourism to Mexico. Last year, we were happy to receive more than 100,000 Koreans visiting Mexico.
Right.
Only about 15,000 Mexicans came to Korea, but the numbers are going up every year, almost 20% every year. So it's important that there is an expansion of the direct connections of our peoples. And we are engaged in these activities of bringing the culture of Mexico, history. History is very important for us, and we would like to invite more people to go to Mexico so that they can witness firsthand the many possibilities of the Mexican culture, art, music, and the way we enjoy life.
Right. So I hear the Embassy of Mexico is responsible for creating and running these programs for cultural exchange. What have you got in store for this year in particular?
In particular, I mean, you probably remember that last year we made a good presentation of the works by Diego Rivera, and there was another exhibition of Frida Kahlo works. This year, they are coming back again together, both Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo at the end of May in Seoul. We are bringing a a very good presentation of music, with traditional music, played by marimba.
Right.
Next month in May, early May, in the High Soul Festival in Central
fun.
Plaza. We are also taking part in the film festivals, particularly in Busan and Bucheon also. We are bringing a special gastronomical festival
Yeah.
for the month of September that you cannot miss. I think it's
I'll
important
definitely seek that out.
that we can share this part of the Mexican joy to the Korean people. And we will also working together not only in the Mexican embassy program, but also with other institutions, public and private, in Korea, so as to bring different presentations to Seoul and to different regions in this country.
Right. It's fantastic that we're seeing so many aspects of Mexican culture right here in Korea. Now, before you became a diplomat, you were actually a professor at the Faculty of Political and Social Sciences at the University of Mexico. How did you move from that to, or why did you decide to pursue a career in diplomacy?
Well, actually, my initial and final goal was to become a diplomat.
Okay, so you always had that in mind.
Yeah, and I was preparing myself, working also as a professor, as a teacher. We always say that there are teachers and there are doers. So I like to do, and I like to teach. I have never abandoned the practice of teaching. I've been, apart from, of course, my concentration is on the diplomatic life.
Yeah.
But I've been always working on sharing the knowledge with the other generations.
Sure.
In the Mexican Diplomatic Academy, sometime working in Los Angeles, for example, I was associated to UCLA in special programs. In Prague, being ambassador there, I dedicated also some time to teach the history of Latin America and the relations with the United States in special courses in the universities in Prague, and also in Switzerland by engaging in different conferences. So, I mean, this is like a permanent interest of mine. So how do we work effectively, and how do we share the lessons we are learning through life?
Share the knowledge. Okay. And our final question on the interview is always, what is the ultimate goal in your life?
Well, the ultimate goal is to achieve the goals that we set in our work professionally, to keep building a good family. And as diplomats, we are always sort of crossing lines between personal and professional lives. I mean, there is no separation, in fact. In the diplomatic life, we say that we are very quixotic. I mean, we follow Don Quixote in many aspects. And I would say that we keep dreaming the impossible dream.
Okay.
Impossible dream is how to undo the wrongdoings, how to better communicate, how to armor ourselves with the intellectual weapons so that we can achieve better communication, better cooperation, better translation of these activities into the social well-being of our people. And for us, or for sometimes, this is an impossible dream. But in diplomacy, we keep dreaming the impossible dream.
And keep running towards it.
That's
Okay, well, thank you so much for your
thank you very
insights
much.
today.
Thank
It's
you.
been fascinating, and I know through your activities and the continuous talks between the Republic of Korea and Mexico, we'll see a really exciting and fruitful relationship in the years to come.
We try to do our best. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.